I was halfway through sanding the porch rail when a deputy walked up my steps and slapped a bright orange "Cease work" notice on the post. The paper crackled in the cold, and behind him stood a woman in a navy suit holding a leather folio, like a trophy. Chin up, voice, cool as ice. Comply with Oak Crest standards. In 30 days, or we escalate, and I said as evenly as I could. Ma'am, my house sits 61 feet outside your HOA line, and I can prove it. She smiled without her eyes and said, Not anymore. Yeah, that happened. My name is Cal Bennett, and this little ranch on Sycamore Lane is the house my father planked with oak and stubbornness. I bought it back after retiring from real estate law. I wanted boards that fit because someone measured twice a porch where a man could watch storms roll in without a letter about his wind chimes or his mailbox color. And most days, that's exactly what I had. The hum of the sander, the smell of sawdust and coffee, the brass survey marker out back. The county set in 1979. Bennett Madpur. A coin of truth sunk in concrete, 61 feet from that marker to the edge of my porch. Then as now, you know what I mean. The woman finally gave me a name, Lydia Crane, acting president of Oak Crest Estates, and she fanned glossy pages across my porch table like she was dealing blackjack updated boundary map. A one-time infrastructure assessment for $5,100 monthly dues of $135. A photo of my mailbox circled in red like it had robbed a bank. She tapped a line with her pen and said I was now within the Neighborhood Integration Initiative and my exterior work was unauthorized. I didn't bite. I asked for the statute, the board resolution, the meeting minutes, and she did the thing bullies do when they sense a wall. She leaned in 1 inch and said, Delays only complicate matters. The 30-day window starts now. Then she heel-clicked down my steps so loud the street dogs looked up. Soon as she turned the corner, I called the county recorder's office. Anita Cho, a voice that sounded like it had heard everything. Twice she put me on hold. Came back with paper rustling and said, Last change for Oak Crest was 2019, and it reduced their footprint. Nothing on any integration initiative. Bring whatever I had. And she'd look 2 calls later. I reached the real HOA treasurer, Marcia Hale, and when I asked if Lydia was their president, she laughed, then stopped laughing. Our president is Rick Donovan. We did not expand boundaries, period, and that's when I felt the floor settle under me again. On Sunday, I laid Lydia's pages beside the real stuff from my closing file, and the differences jumped like neon. Her map had a friendly wobble that conveniently bulged right over my driveway. County plats don't wobble. Her citations didn't exist. Her seal was internet pretty, but not the state crest. It smelled like a stunt, not a statute. Then the pressure started anyway. A certified letter titled Final Notice of Territorial Inclusion. A text from an unknown number saying, Non-compliance will accrue fines daily. My lawn guy called to cancel the weekend haul-off and apologized like he'd broken my window. Cedarline Community Services told us your address is flagged until HOA approvals come through. And Monday morning, Deputy Ben Ortiz came back, not happy about it, handed me a temporary injunction, and said as kindly as a man can say it, that a judge signed it. So I had to stop construction until it got sorted. He added almost under his breath that the whole thing smelled off, and I believed him. I taped plastic around the doorway, put the tools away, and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and made a list. County verification. HOA verification vendor. Connections, victims. Paper trail, fear, hates. Lists, bullies, hate them more. The phones began to ring. Ruth Ellison. 74, said Lydia. Stood in her doorway in July and calmly told her to pay $3,400 in back fees by the end of the month, or the HOA would place a lien. Ruth paid because her late husband always handled those things, and she didn't want to be the neighbor who ruined property values than Carlos Navarro. Working 2 jobs with a newborn told me Lydia had him sign a temporary property management authorization because it was standard during onboarding. She'd been patient and professional, and he'd signed. And every time he said the word standard, you could hear how small it made him feel, yeah? That landed. Marcia and Rick went digging through service contracts and found the thread we needed Cedar Line. The HOA's landscaping and maintenance vendor had a consultant login labeled Community Liaison. The user was Lydia Crane. Permissions. Included resident profiles, new owner notes, senior households' addresses. Near the boundary, 18 months of access logs. It wasn't random at all. It was hunting season with a spreadsheet hook. The people least likely to fight knock with a smile and a binder and a deadline. Tell me that doesn't sound familiar. By Tuesday afternoon, I had a case file thick enough to wedge a door tabs that read, Maps Minutes. Money. True plats next to Lydia's cartoons. Victim statements signed and initialed the Cedar Line access log. Printed before anyone could say audit. We scheduled an emergency community meeting for Wednesday night at the Hawthorne Bend Center, open to the neighborhood, recorded no shadows to hide in. And right on cue, Lydia sent a process server to dump a civil complaint on my porch, Crane v. Bennett defamation and interference, plus a bar complaint claiming I was practicing law without a license because I helped neighbors write sworn statements. And I'll be honest, for about an hour, the stack got inside my ribs because I've seen that tactic flood the calendar, so the truth drowns in procedure. Make the target pick which fire to put out, while the real blaze eats the attic. The community center smelled like coffee that had been on the burner since noon. Folding chairs everywhere, my 3 banker boxes labeled neat, because neat keeps you calm. 2 people in suits on the back wall, pretending to be invisible. Investigators, if I've ever seen them. And I started simple. Not with law with a tool, my father's yellow level. I held it up and said, "This thing doesn't care how confident your voice is or how expensive your folio looks. It only knows straight. 61 feet from a brass marker to this porch." It was true when I was 9, and it's true tonight. The room let out a breath, and we walked slide by slide county plat, with soldier straight lines next to Lydia's friendly bulge state code book with no neighborhood integration initiative. The bylaw amendment she filed that week, with signatures so tidy you could iron a shirt on them, compared to the real meeting minutes. Where Rick signs like a lefty doctor in a moving truck, we had travel receipts that put the board in 3 different cities on the night of her supposed vote. We had phone logs and timestamps. Then I asked if anyone wanted to speak, and Ruth stood up and said, "Lydia said Leanne, like she was telling me my lights were getting cut. So I paid her. And Carlos said she told me that form was standard." I had a newborn, I signed, and you could hear indignation find its footing, that low, steady sound a room makes when the mask is off. Lydia arrived like she owned the place, smile glued on voice bright. There seems to be confusion about routine community management. Bennett's remarks are defamatory. Our territorial integration is authorized, and fees are mandatory, not optional. She reached for the projector, and I stepped between her and the light and said, "Perfect." Then show us the board resolution and the statute number. She blinked, said administrative procedures don't require public explanation. They require compliance. I held up her map and said, "You can't move a fence with PowerPoint." And people laughed the way people laugh. When patience is used up, a man in the third row raised his phone and played a voicemail of Lydia's voice explaining that failure to pay would trigger pre-foreclosure activity and that urgent cooperation would protect equity. And when it ended, nobody coughed. Rick, the actual president, stood and said, "Miss Crane, you are not and have never been on our board. There is no integration resolution. Your filings have been reported as fraudulent." Bria added that Cedarline terminated her access 2 hours ago. And for the first time, I saw Lydia try to do math. That wouldn't add. She pivoted to me and said I was harassing her in front of witnesses and would be held personally liable. And I said, quiet as a tape line on fresh paint, "Show me the law, or show yourself out." Then the twist landed for everyone at once. The investigator on the left stood and flipped a badge. "Ms. Crane, I'm with the county attorney's office. We have a warrant regarding suspected wire fraud, forged filings, and unlawful access to resident data. Please place your folio on the table and keep your hands visible." She looked at the door, looked at the room, put the folio down, and it hit plastic like a final period. Not fireworks, not a victory hung, just a thud that felt like a house settling after you. Jack the Joists level the room didn't cheer. We didn't need to. Sometimes justice is quiet because it's sure. That's where I leave it. Not on a montage, not on a champagne toast. On the moment a binder of pretty lies met a table and a neighborhood remembered that authority is not a tone, it's a paper trail. You can trace from a meeting to a vote to a record, in a drawer with a date that matches the calendar. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what you think this really was. Community or control protection or power trip. Have you ever been on the business end of a letter that felt more like theater than laws do? HOAs help your street, or help the people who like telling other people what to do? Was I right to drag it into the light instead of lawyering it to death behind closed doors? Yeah. Argue with me. Tell your story. Drop your city, your state, your country. And if you want more true stories told with the tape measure, before the punchline hit, subscribe and share this with the neighbor who needs to hear it.